Donald Trump has launched a massive attack on illegal immigration, regardless of the implications to the American economy, it seems. The construction industry is one of those directly affected by these policies, and it's threatening to worsen what the industry says already is a severe shortage of workers. Today we have with us Brian Turmail, Vice President of Public Affairs at the Associated General Contractors of America, or AGC, to discuss those challenges. Now, according to AGC, most construction companies in South Carolina, where I live, are having a hard time finding workers. If that's the case here, it's probably as bad or worse in many other states. Now, Brian, welcome to the Lean to the Left podcast. I really appreciate you joining us and being willing to share your concerns about these issues with us today.
Thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Now, I understand, Brian, that the construction industry will need 454,000 new workers this year. But the H-2B visa program, which is designed to bring in temporary foreign workers, is capped at 66,000. Now, AGC is calling for that to be increased. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I could just back up a second, let me tell
Sure.
you how we got into the kind of labor shortages we are and why visas, like a lawful work authorization program like H-2B visas, part of the answer.
All right.
This all goes, if you got a second, this all goes back about 40 years when we decided as a country that we're heading into this post-industrial economy and that we needed to invest all of our eggs in the basket of telling every student to go to college, graduate, and end up in the service sector or the sort of knowledge economy.
Right.
And at the same time, we started shifting all this federal funding from a mix of vocational education and college track to we put all our eggs into actual, college prep. So
Right.
we looked at with the Progressive Policy Institute last summer, sort of federal education funding levels. And for every dollar they spend on what we now call career and technical education, what I knew was voc ed, the federal government spends $4 encouraging students to go to college. So not a shock. We've got a lot of young workers entering the economy who never even heard of construction as part of the menu of career choices, right? So we have a real hard time recruiting young American men and women to get into construction because they don't know the career exists and they don't have the skills needed to get into it. And then, yes, as you mentioned, we've got an immigration policy in this country that really doesn't provide many opportunities for people to come in lawfully and work in the United States in construction. The H-2B visa program, in any given year, there are between 60,000 and 120,000 H-2B visas given out. Of that, about 6 to 12,000 go to construction. The rest go to the hospitality industry. For an industry with over 7 million employees, 6 to 12,000 people doesn't make a huge dent in our labor needs.
Correct.
And then there's some number of people working in construction with a program called temporary protected status, which is you're from a country that's so dangerous that you've got temporary status to be a lawful worker in the United States. But the Trump administration has begun canceling, it's called TPS for short, TPS work authorizations for men and women from Venezuela, men and women from Haiti, and then we've got some deadlines coming up for men and women from Honduras and men and women from El Salvador that if those get canceled, those will actually take a pretty big bite out of construction markets in certain parts of the country.
Yeah.
And then you've got a number of people working here under the Dreamers program. I can never remember what DACA stands for, but the Dreamers program, which is you were a child when your parents brought you into the country unlawfully. But since an executive order from the Obama administration, you've been treated as someone with lawful status in the United States.
Right.
But that's under threat from a possible Supreme Court decision that could come as early as next summer, right? So they're not, other than that, there's really no other way to get into construction lawfully if you were born overseas and you want to be part of the American dream, other than to come into the country unlawfully.
Yeah,
So,
and it's probably going to get worse, right? Given
I
the
mean,
policies that are taking place.
if you think about our workforce policy, the sum it up is we don't want our kids to work in construction. We don't want people to lawfully come into the industry from overseas. We've got essentially an open border for the last 30 years. And oh, by the way, we want to build trillions of dollars worth of stuff. Good news, the federal government is investing over $1 trillion in construction between roads and bridges, water plants, clean energy facilities, semiconductor plants, huge investments. But we shouldn't be surprised that we've got a segment of the population working in construction who are undocumented workers. That's a logical consequence of a lot of decisions made in Washington over the last 40 years.
Yeah, and
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
no, go ahead, go ahead. I was gonna head a different direction, but ask your question, Bob. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right, fine. I just wanted to follow up because we built a home here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's a home in a community with the homes are all built by this one big company, H.R. Horton.
Mhm.
And when I looked at the workforce that was building these homes, they were all Hispanic. And I got to think that probably many of them were undocumented workers. Now, I don't know that for a fact, but I just got to believe that.
Sure.
And so, if that's the case, and here in this area, there's a great deal of pressure going on right now with new homes being built, new apartments being built, new townhomes being built, rental properties being built, and the attendant highways and other supporting infrastructure needed also being built. Now, if the workforce can't be here to build those homes, what are these companies like H.R. Horton going to do?
You're on an exactly right point. So when we think about like construction workforce policies, I think many people, that's your problem, right? But you deal with it. But
Yeah,
here's the rub. If we don't have enough people to build what we want to build as a country, what does that mean for your community? It means that school that you were hoping they were going to renovate this summer. So it's
right.
got a better gym, or it's got better air conditioning, or it's got like a new computer lab, might not get built,
Yeah,
right? Or it'll take twice as long because we don't have people to build it. That
yeah,
police station you wanted around the corner because your new community is seeing a rise in crime
right.
may not get built. That fire station that you want. Or even, frankly, you wanted to expand the highway so you're not stuck in traffic going down to the Strand on when you've got family in town. May not happen because the lack of workers means it's cost more to build things. Or even, let's say that you've got some company that wants to build a new manufacturing facility in your area, and that could come with like hundreds of really good jobs for your community. But we don't have enough people to build that plant. So they decide instead they're going to build it in Mexico. So, in other words, workforce shortages in the construction industry undermine communities around the country's ability to develop economically, right? If we can't build things, then your community is stuck and stagnant instead of able to grow and thrive. And that's why this is a broader problem. And the answer, the easiest answer, not the easiest answer, but the most obvious answer is yes, of course, we should be investing more in career and technical education so that we can encourage American boys and girls to get into careers in construction,
Sure.
right? This is an industry that pays almost $40 an hour.
Hmm.
It doesn't require college debt. Like from an economic point of view, parents should be like pushing their children into construction. Like you can go own your own truck, you can have a nice life, and you
Right.
don't have to have this kind of saddled with college debt the rest of your life. But even if folks in Washington agree with us and double spending on what's known as the Perkins Act, which funds career and technical education in high schools, it's going to take years to rebuild that pipeline, right? It took us
Mhm.
decades to dismantle it. It's going to
Sure.
take a couple of years before we can get those programs up and running in enough numbers and enough quality to make a difference on our workforce supply for construction. So
Sure.
we need some kind of a dedicated temporary visa program for construction so that we can bring people in lawfully. We could do this so that we can make sure that we're bringing in people that are safe, that we can tax, that are trackable, but we can also do it to make sure that the people we bring in aren't getting exploited by unscrupulous contractors who are then going out and underbidding our members, right? We need to do this so that we can grow our communities economically and by having enough people to build in construction. But there's a better way to do it than the current status quo.
Yeah, and back to the your point about the shortages. If there's a shortage of, let's say, new homes being built because of the fact that you can't get enough workers, won't that drive up the price of the homes that are built, that are
Yes.
sold? And so the American consumer is going to be saddled with increased inflation because of this.
Not only that, but if you think about how most communities fund public education, it's
Hmm.
off real estate taxes. So if
Yeah,
you can't actually build enough homes because you don't have enough people to build them,
yeah,
guess who suffers? Not just the consumer shopping for a home, but anyone, any parent who's putting their child into public education, that might be one less assistant, one less instructor, one less special class. They may not have band, they may not do theater because we're not building enough. So the
Mhm.
consequences are a lot broader than just poor construction firm doesn't have enough people to build.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're
And
right.
we all got enough problems to worry about. But the point we're trying to make here is that this affects anyone, whether they're in the business of construction or not. And if they want their communities to be successful, then yeah, you should probably pay attention to and push your local officials, and to the extent that you're comfortable doing it, your federal officials, to like, let's invest in career and technical education. And in the meantime, let's have some kind of like common sense workforce policy so that we can bring some people in and not be worried that we don't know where they're from or we don't know if they're paying taxes or anything like that.
Yeah, okay. Now, this is probably a reach, but Trump has come up with this gold card program where people can pay $5 million to, to come into this country. That going to be any kind of help for you guys?
That's a good question. There already is a maybe it's a silver card program to use the parlance of the president, but like a visa program available for anyone who invests up to $500,000 in residential construction. And so there has been a pipeline, small but not insignificant pipeline of people getting a visa in the United States
Right.
because they're investing in construction. Where that's helped is it's put money into new construction developments at a time when maybe domestic money is sitting on the table on the sidelines because
Hmm.
interest rates are a little bit higher. So it's helped to capitalize some construction. But obviously, someone who's putting 500, half a million or $5 million in is probably not going to end up being a laborer or a carpenter or an electrician on your job site.
Probably not.
Yeah, I'm taking a guess here. They
Yeah,
might, they maybe will employ some, but if they can't find them, it doesn't help either.
yeah, that's right. Maybe they just like to work outside, and so they'll pay 5 million, five
Maybe,
million.
that'd be
Yeah,
great,
maybe
but
that's it. Yeah, sure.
again, probably not in the numbers that are going to make a difference for our economy.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's see here. What about your industry itself? What are you doing, given the current atmosphere, to cope, to try to help your members?
Yeah, obviously, one of the big worries is what the administration is doing or promising to do is probably a better way to put it when it comes to undocumented workers. Like I said, we're not naive. We appreciate that there are a number of undocumented workers working in the construction industry.
Sure.
But the president has frequently talked about how they want to focus on kind of three segments of undocumented workers, the ones who are engaged in additional criminal activity, ones who are a national security threat, and ones who have been ordered by a judge to leave the country.
Right.
If that's who they're going to focus on with deportations, there's pretty much broad bipartisan support that those folks need to be out of the country. I
Sure.
think the difference is the policy debates in Washington are about how you go about doing that. Where do you detain them? Who pays for it? And that kind of thing. Not should they or should they not be deported from the country.
Hmm.
But if they go broader, if the president gets impatient and wants bigger numbers, as we're hearing that perhaps he does,
Hmm.
and they start deporting people who are otherwise responsibly engaged in economic activity. Look, there are literally millions of men and women who, yes, they committed the original sin of coming to this country without permission. Yeah,
Right.
they didn't do it the lawful way. But otherwise, every morning they put their boots on like you and me and they go to work and they contribute to the economy. Are we really going to kick these people out of the country when we don't have enough people to keep pace with demand as it is?
Yeah.
No, we're not going to. And but if they start going after these communities, what's going to happen is that we'll see higher rates of absenteeism from job sites, right? Because the way that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement rules work, unless they pair up with another law enforcement agency, they can't really go and kick your door down and come into your house, right? They don't have that authority. And they
Yeah.
can't go into a job site unless they're paired up with Homeland Security investigations or alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or drug enforcement agency. So that's why many of these detentions actually take place when people are driving to and from work or they're outside of their school picking their kids up at the end of the day,
Uh,
right? And what's going to happen is the immigration community, they've got networks like everyone else. They got the same internet we do. Word's going to spread pretty quickly and they're going to stay home. And then you're going to have economic activity grind to even more of a halt than it does now because our labor shortages will get even worse. So we've been having lots of conversations with the Trump administration and lots of conversations with folks on Capitol Hill, just trying to explain to them why, yes, we understand they're undocumented. Yes, we need some kind of path to get them back on the right path, whether it's an earned path to legal status so they can contribute taxes and benefit and be protected from being exploited. But that deporting all these folks from the country would be like economic, if not economic suicide, it would definitely be economic self-harm. It'd be like those guys in the trenches in World War I who didn't want to go over the trench, like shooting their foot. Literally would be like shooting your foot economically. Probably not going to do that despite the rhetoric, but we got to be careful about communicating who we're actually going after so we don't scare a large chunk of the workforce from staying home. But yes, we got to keep them, we got to protect them from being exploited as well. It's not fair for them. And frankly, it's not fair for you and me to have to compete against some undocumented worker who's being exploited and not being paid a fair wage. Like, no one benefits from that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm curious to know whether the effort by the administration to slash the federal workforce to the extent that it is, including closing down entire departments like the Department of Education, is that having any, are you guys concerned about that in any way? Is it have any kind of effect on what you do?
Not the short answer is not yet, but could. It particularly one of the things that the president wants to do is significantly reduce the federal real estate footprint, right? They want to slash leases. You know, they at one point for a couple hours they had the Justice Department headquarters, the Housing and Urban Development headquarters, the Department of Labor headquarters. They had for sale signs outside of those buildings. They were going to sell them. Someone must inform them that that's a little bit harder to do than they think, and they took those signs down. But if you release hundreds of millions of square feet of real estate into the market at a time when there's not a lot of office development right now, and most communities are seeing near to record high office vacancy because of this work from home trend that began after the pandemic or during the pandemic, you're going to depress the value of commercial real estate. So just about every city in the country, major, minor, and in between city in the country, most of the revenue those cities generate, whether it's Columbia, whether it's Charleston or Greenville or even downtown Myrtle Beach, comes from the commercial taxes on commercial real estate.
Right.
If you suddenly depress the value of commercial real estate because you flooded the market with new vacant office buildings, then every city in America gets a further hole blown in their budget. And that will impact their ability to build new roads, build new recreation facilities, improve schools, pave the sidewalk, whatever it might be. That would then ultimately, yes, depress a lot of construction activity because state and local governments do account for a decent amount of construction activity in the market every year.
Okay, I wonder if they've given any thought to those considerations.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm not hazarding a guess, but let's hope that they are. And
given their early experience with firing people and then calling them back in, saying, "Whoops, need to do that."
I will say this, just in case we've got any members watching the podcast, that we are doing everything we can to explain the consequences of these decisions to the Trump administration. So we're not taking it for granted they've thought it through. No insult to them. Just our job is to make sure we're representing our members' point of view in Washington. We are the special interest group for the construction industry. We're doing our job.
Said very tactfully.
There you go. And by the way, I had dinner with a friend last night who's a federal contractor, and he told me that they've lost and recovered their main federal contract 5 times in the last week. In terms of how things are going.
Oh my God.
He says it was a long week. So.
Now the other question is tariffs. Now, will they affect your industry?
Oh, 100%. Yes,
absolutely. The cost of construction is going to increase, right?
But look, we're all for. We would love it if everything that our members needed were made in the United States. But that's not reality, right? We've had a global economy for decades, right or wrong, whether you like it or not, that's a fact of life. So even something that's assembled in a US factory has components from all over the world. And just like it's going to take years to rebuild that domestic pipeline for training children to be construction workers, young adults to be construction workers. It's going to take time to on-source all this manufacturing, if ever. When you put tariffs in place, what does that mean? It means the materials prices that you as a construction firm pay for steel, for electrical switching gear, for the fasteners that connect the trusses to the wall, whatever you need, will go up by at least 25%.
Mhm.
And guess what happens to those added costs,
What
right?
happens?
They don't take the money out of their sort of, oh, in case there's more tariffs bag. They're
Right.
going to pass them on to consumers.
Sure.
That means construction is going to get that much more expensive,
Okay.
right? And again, we just talked about how labor shortages are making construction more expensive. Tariffs are going to make construction more expensive. And even, by the way, if all the steel and all the other materials you use happen to be the ones that are made in the United States, guess what's going to happen to those prices when tariffs go into effect? If you were in the business of selling lemonade and someone came to you and said, that stand next door, that's your competitor, they have to charge 25 cents more per glass of lemonade than now. What are you going to do to your price of lemonade? You're going to make sure you're still cheaper than your competitor, but you'll probably go up in your prices by 20% as well, because you know you've got room to raise your prices and
Sure.
still be cheaper than the next person.
Sure. Sure.
You,
I just did a little math. And if it's a 25% tariff that's passed through, and the house originally would sell for $300,000, that house is not going to sell for $375,000.
that's
Right?
right. Yep. Yeah.
Simple
Look,
math.
I'm not a math guy. Like, I still haven't figured out what sine, cosine, tangent are in trigonometry, but I'm going to take your word for it that the math is correct. And yes,
It's just simple
that's
math.
yes. And,
'Cause-
and 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 not just your home, but again, let's say you for that tax measure to raise more money so that you can modernize the schools in your school district.
yeah,
When you're expecting to get 6 schools renovated, those tariffs mean you might just be renovating 4 of those schools.
absolutely. In our community, when new construction is built for, let's say, a highway, in our community, we had a highway that it really was like a two-lane country road, but it went
Mhm.
through all these developments that were being built. And so they widened it to 4 lanes, limited access. And but they paid for it with a special tax that the voters approved at the election.
Yeah.
We're paying for this widening of this road, not the tourists that came in, but we're paying for it.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if that's a way that other communities might choose to go if funding isn't available for their projects that they need from the federal government.
Usual for community to do some kind of like special taxation or special assessment
Yeah,
to fund infrastructure improvements.
yeah,
But again, let's say you voted on that. So you voted on that, and that measure was intended to raise, I'll make up a number, right? $10 million. I don't know
yeah,
what
right, sure.
that $10 million under tariffs is going to buy you fewer miles of road
Absolutely.
improvements
Yeah,
than when you voted on it. So then
yeah.
you might have to go back and add additional taxes just to get that road widened all the way to the last development.
Hmm. Okay. So much for the battle against inflation.
Look, here's our message to the Trump administration on this, which is we urge you to resolve the underlying disputes that are causing you to put in place the tariffs, right? A lot of these tariffs, the Trump administration, what President Trump is doing is using tariffs. I think he's this is not saying something he hasn't said, is using tariffs as a negotiating tactic to try and drive some kind of change. I think most part with Mexico and Canada, it has to do with stopping the flow of fentanyl, border protections. And I don't know, particularly in terms of folks coming up from Mexico and through Mexico into the United States.
Mm.
Well, let's get those resolved quickly because the tariffs are clearly, if you saw what happened when they announced and then rolled back the tariffs this week, they're gonna sap a lot of momentum out of the market. And the other challenge is anyone who runs a business can tell you this. The worst thing for a business is uncertainty. If you don't know what you're going to be paying for something in 6 months,
Right.
but you've got to bid on a project today, you've got to bid on that new sidewalk or that road widening project today, what are you going to do? You're going to be pretty conservative in your bid. You're going to
Yeah.
assume the worst case scenario because if you don't, and you assume the optimistic case and don't account for the tariffs, then when the tariffs come in, you eat the cost as a construction firm.
Yeah.
So yeah, things, even the threat, in other words, even the threat of tariffs raises prices.
Incredible. Okay. All right, Brian, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just one thing, we were talking about how do we get more funding for workforce training in our schools? How do we get a legal visa program? If
Yeah.
anyone's interested in learning more and or interested in telling the elected officials that we should have a better workforce policy in place,
Mhm.
we did create, because we couldn't help ourselves, a website people can visit. It's
Okay.
called workforcedoneright.org. So one word, workforcedoneright.org.
Okay.
org. Just go there. You can read up. You can find the information. If what we're talking about makes sense to you, there's a little button you can hit right there, and you can let your member of Congress know that, hey, can we put more money into career and technical education so our children can compete for these jobs? And can we have a better way of getting people from overseas into construction in a way that's trackable and taxable?
Excellent.
We're
Thank you.
asking people to give that site a look, and if you feel comfortable clicking that button and letting your member of Congress know, we'd be thrilled, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I'll put that website URL in the description for this episode so that you guys can just click on it there if you see it.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for the time. I appreciate it. Nice chatting with you.
Hey guys, I'm Bob Gaddy, founder and host of Lean to the Left. I'm excited to share our new book, Hijack Nation, Donald Trump's Attack on America's Greatness, co-authored with political analyst and professor C.J. Waldron. In Hijack Nation, we delve into the unfolding story of America's political landscape through a series of essays from leantotheleft.net. We explore how Donald Trump's presidency has transformed American politics, challenging our values and institutions. Hijack Nation isn't just a book, it's a call to action. It invites you to reflect on what it means to be American in a divided political landscape. Together we can reclaim our nation's greatness. So get your copy of Hijack Nation today. Visit leantotheleft.net and click on the Books tab to learn more and to order.